Lucky, is there anything that you would like to say? Yeah? You want to tell people about your journey? About how you came from Mexico to the UK? What do you think about it? What do you think about the weather? Yeah? That's interesting. That's good to know. What do you think about the food? Is it true that British food is bad? I think you've actually liked it. Do you want to tell people what you've had that you didn't have before? You've had venison, you've had wild boar, you've had freeze-dried raw, you've had some new cooked brands. We're going to talk all about it. Yeah, Auntie Stacey and I are going to talk all about it, say how you've done on it, but I'd love to get your opinion. What do you think? Yeah. And do you like the treats? Yeah, you've really enjoyed the treats, huh? Do you have favorite treats? Yeah, well, you really enjoyed the turkey. Weren't so keen on the rabbit lung, but we're getting there. And you had your first rabbit ear. Oh, are you done with this conversation? Well, thanks for joining. Hello, and welcome to Mystic Dog Mama, the podcast for soul-led dog mamas, where you'll discover how to best nourish your dog and yourself, mind, body, and soul. I'm your host, Dr. Alexia Miller. Hi there, we are back. This Fetch First Friday episode is actually more of a First Fetch weekend episode because we return to our regularly scheduled Mystic Dog Mama programming next Saturday when I'll be releasing a really fantastic conversation with Bean Bindless, a trained chef, nutritionist, and perimenopause doula. You are going to love it, so make sure you're subscribed to the podcast if you aren't already so that you'll get notified when it's released. But today, Stacey Renphrey of Hozho, Hounds and I talk about Lucky's and my journey moving back to the UK from Mexico. But specifically, we'll talk about how the F.E.T.C.H framework helped me prepare Lucky and handle some little health blips that showed up once we arrived. If you're new here and wondering what F.E.T.C.H is, F.E.T.C.H stands for Fresh Food, Energetics, Targeted Approaches, Curiosity, and Holistic Health. These are what Stacey and I see as the pillars to our dog's health, and it's the same framework that we each use in our canine nutrition consultations to help our clients support their dogs to experience optimal health. In this episode, you'll learn how I use Lucky's energetic paw print to target supplements to support him both before travel and to handle an upset tummy. You'll also hear how an understanding of the traditional Chinese veterinary medicine body clock and meridian pathways clued me into what Lucky's itching and zoomie hour were showing me, and then how I was able to support him. And I'll share about what I found most helpful in navigating the stress of international travel with a dog. We're talking planes, trains, automobiles, and chuck in an overnight ferry to boot. If you enjoy this way of approaching your dog's health journey, then come and join our free Facebook group, Fetch First Light, and be surrounded by a community of like-minded folks who want to integrate evidence-based nutrition with spiritual wisdom in order to create optimal health for their dogs and for themselves. I've left the link to this in the show notes. All right, on that note, let's go. Hi, Stacey.
Hi, this is so bizarre. We're actually in the same room.
We are in the same room.
Oh.
Welcome to what we're going to refer to as, instead of a Fetch First Friday this month, it is a Fetch First Weekend edition, because Stacey and I are currently at Fetch headquarters. We are in a bit of a retreat of sorts where we are hashing out some really exciting, incredible offerings for all you guys. And we've got Lucky and Ted here. And
Ted, you can just Ted. No, Lucky can just about. Oh no, we've got an ear.
we've got an ear coming in. But we decided that for this particular edition, what we would do is I was going to do two separate episodes, but we are going to park the discussion that we are going to do on lab-grown meat and vegan dog foods and bring that over into May's edition of this series. But today what we're going to do is actually talk about the thing that I said that I was going to share with you guys at the beginning of March of the big change, the big shift that Lucky and I are going through, the big journey, and that was us moving from Mexico back to the UK. And so I'll talk to you about how that experience kind of unfolded and how specifically how I have been supporting Lucky prior to the journey, through the journey, and now post journey using the Fetch lens. So we thought we were actually having a conversation. He is totally going to try. Yep, he is going to sneak.
He's getting down.
He is getting, oh, he might just steal the chair. Yep, he's going to steal the chair. But we thought what might be useful is to actually talk you through the Fetch lens, applying that to the thought process that I was taking in getting Lucky prepped. But also, there have been some interesting developments with him, with how he sort of has adjusted to a new climate, totally new environments, new people. He's never been in a situation before where he's lived with other people and other dogs and all of that. So how he's coping with it. And what we started to notice in terms of patterns with him that we think would be useful for you to hear about, so you can start thinking about how this might apply to your dogs, how you can use the Fetch lens to think through anything that's coming up with your dogs. So we thought we would prioritize that and save the other discussion on lab-grown meat and the vegan dog food market.
Because it's a big one as well. So we've been down so many rabbit holes already. So I think, it's going to take a little bit more prep as well, because there's a lot to cover.
There is a lot to cover.
But it's so interesting.
It is so interesting. So look forward, stay tuned for that one. But for this week, we are going to have a little think about little Luckykins through the Fetch lens.
Yeah, because you've had to adapt it quite a lot as well, and I think it also highlights how flexible the Fetch approach is, and that when you start to put situations through the Fetch approach, it really enables you to go, oh, hang on a minute, yeah, I can adapt that, I can change that, and it's fluid. There's nothing it's not stuck.
No,
it's so changeable, and that so many things have happened, which we're going to explain. But yeah, it's been interesting.
It has been interesting. It has been interesting. So to give you guys a little bit of context, and Stacey will ask me some questions, and I'll do a little bit of reflection on this. But to give you a context, if you're not familiar with Lucky's and my story, I rescued him when he rescued me. I always say he came to me when he was 12 weeks old. During the COVID pandemic, when I was visiting friends and family in Mexico and got stuck. And so he was born in Mexico and raised in Mexico. That was his only environment that he had really known. Because as I traveled, I would leave him with friends and family there. So he hadn't been outside of that kind of climate context. And he started off his journey with me with various GI issues and kidney issues. And so kidneys are his kind of, I don't like referring to it as his weak spot, but that's kind of his central, that is his constitution. When you look at TCM, when we get to the E part of Fetch for the energetics, he is a water dog. So he's a cool dog with water being his dominant element, and that being kind of controlled in a sense by the kidneys as the dominant organ system. So because he presented really young with kidney issues, that pointed me to the fact that that was kind of where I needed to focus for him. So as we were looking at coming over to the UK, I started doing a lot of prep work around getting him emotionally supported, because again, the kidneys are associated with fear and anxiety, and he is a reactive dog. He's fear aggressive. He's afraid. He doesn't do well with a lot of changes. So I was looking at how can I best support him on all levels throughout this entire process. And I started the preparation well in advance of actually bringing him over. So getting him used to different things. I had been working with him since day one about being comfortable in his carrier, for example, that has become his safe spot. So I really built upon that and started increasing the training around having the door closed on that and zipped up and carrying him in it so you would get used to it moving and all the stuff around that. So when we're talking about Fetch, it's not just about what goes in the bowl, as we always say, but how do we prep the whole dog for the situation that they're about to face? So I started thinking about what are the things that I have control over that I can get him used to without obviously getting on a plane? How could I get him used to different noises, the different movements he might be feeling, all of that? So knowing that regardless it was going to be a stressful situation, but how could I potentially minimize that? So those are some of the things that I started with early on, before a few months before I knew that we were going to be flying, in order to get him used to some of that stuff. But then specifically because I know that his kidneys, and I modify his diet to better support the kidneys. And I can talk to you about how I actually do that. But I also started ramping up some of the different food supports from a Chinese medicine perspective for the kidneys. So I started adding in more black sesame seeds, for example, and in his veggie mixes in his food, I prioritized kidney supporting vegetables like dark leafy greens or blueberries, and things like eggs, for example, adding more eggs into things that are at the start of life, sprouts, that kind of a thing. I started increasing that for him as we built up to the move, and he was starting to get a sense that, oh, change is coming, like, oh, the suitcases are coming out, all of that kind of stuff, to help support him with that. And then that has continued as we actually made the trip, and then as we've been on this side of it. So that was my initial kind of thinking around the food.
And you'd even done like the PPAD training. Well, there had been attempts at PPAD.
There had been attempts at PPAD training, which failed because Lucky's too smart for my own good. Where I did not train him with PPADs as a puppy. I thought this would be a great time to start it. And I talked to a friend of mine who's a trainer, and she suggested like clicker training, for example, around when he's starting to go to the bathroom. And he quickly learned, oh, if I just lift my leg, I can have a treat. So he would just lift his leg at random points on the walk instead of actually peeing and look at me and ask for treats. So that didn't. Yeah.
But I mean, and I think as well that speaks to the fact that because you know that his kidneys are potentially a weaker spot, for want of a better phrase, but because you know that was part of the knowing that toilet breaks were going to be harder, that would have been an ideal. But how did the toileting go on the, because obviously there was 2 flights.
There were 2 flights.
A boat ride.
We literally did plane, train, automobile. We started off with having to drive to the airport, which was about 5 hours from us. So he had a long car ride, and we did make some breaks in there. But that actually, he's not a huge fan of traveling in the car, but it did help prep us. He was kind of getting used to that. So he did okay with the toileting there. But then I had a 2-hour flight, and then I had a long layover of about 7 hours. And then I had a 10.5-hour flight. And that was the one that I was most concerned about. So what I actually did was I made sure that I was doing functional hydration with him beforehand. So a lot of bone broth. And then I withheld food and liquids for a bit before we actually got on the flight. But I made sure when we had the break between the 2-hour one and the 7-hour layover that I walked him as much as possible, just being around, and got him to wee as much as possible. And I think that was the most helpful for both settling him and making sure that his bladder was empty by the time we got on the plane. And Lucky regularly does hold it during the night. So I knew he could go at least 7-8 hours. I was concerned about pushing it that long again with his kidneys, but I made sure that I added in some into his food previously, that I added in some cranberry supplement, so that I was making sure that basically what that does is it stops any bacteria kind of sticking to the bladder walls that could potentially turn into a UTI. So I wanted to make sure that I was kind of preemptively preventing that possibility. But he did really well. And then as soon as we got off the plane, I found the airport did not have any pet relief areas, which I think is just insane for a major.
That was Schiphol.
It was Schiphol in Amsterdam. But I basically just went to an area there where there wasn't anybody and let him go, and then just cleaned it up. I made sure in terms of prepping myself that I had extra wipes.
Ted wants to join in. I'm going to go and just get him a treat very quickly.
Good idea.
I think that's what.
and Lucky's following. But I just made sure that I brought like cleaning wipes and that sort of thing so I could take care of that. And I think too, in addition to kind of preparing Lucky, one of the other things that I found really helpful was, and this is something that I would encourage any of you who are going to be traveling with your dogs, to prepare the things that are going to help you personally get through this. Because whilst I was hyper focused on what was going to be best for him, this was a huge thing for me too. And I was going through some incredibly emotional experiences, especially with dealing with bureaucracy and like last minute paperwork and all that kind of stuff. And
because there was so much uncertainty at one point with I mean, anyone that's dealt with it, there's stress, and there was so much uncertainty even at the airport.
At the airport,
with the after the 2 hour flight, it was at Mexico City, wasn't it? And there was bureaucracy, so that stress is then going to be part of Lucky and because of you. So it's trying to find those ways to navigate that and think ahead of that, how you're going to manage that. So there was lots of messaging and stuff going on.
There was a lot of crying.
But it's releasing, so it has to come out, doesn't it? So yeah.
It does. So I kind of made like a mental checklist of what would make walking myself through what I was anticipating the entire journey being, and making sure that I had the appropriate things with me, but also making sure that I wasn't carrying too much physically, mentally, emotionally as well, because I knew that would just add to the struggle of it all. But I made sure that I had things that I just accepted. He's probably going to pee in the airport and not be worried about that and feel embarrassed, because I have that tendency too of like the good girl thing. Oh, but he's not supposed to. It's like, well, he doesn't have the option to go to the toilet, and he won't go to the toilet in those sorts of situations if I had just brought him into the women's room or whatever. So just being a little bit forgiving and having things to clean that up, and making sure that I had his water bottle and his little collapsible cup really easy for me to access. So it was, I mean, it sounds silly, but it's like thinking through that sort of stuff. So I was reducing my stress levels of having to like dig through everything to find stuff. And so whatever works for you, kind of thinking through how I had my paperwork. Even I brought like an accordion book that
had everything,
that
about
had
10 copies of everything, didn't it, just in case?
It did, and I needed that actually, because with the paperwork stuff, it was like, do you have an extra copy of this? Thank God that I did. So not coming from a fear place with it, but how I could reassure myself. And I had a system so I knew everything was there, and that made. And I could also, as I'd finished with one set of paperwork and we were done with it, put it to the back and rotate things up. And silly things like that just made me feel more at peace and in control.
Well, I don't think they're silly. That's Monaco. It's great.
It is. But that kind of stuff I found really helpful, in addition to thinking about like how I'm going to deal with food. And from the food perspective, so I wasn't allowed to bring pet food into the EU with me. So what I did though was I had stuff for the Mexico component of it. I made Lucky's normal food and then I dehydrated it. So I had something that was familiar for him, and I dehydrated it into like little discs that made it portable, that I could break up a bit for treats, but also I could feed that to him while we were on the road. So I didn't have to worry about carrying fresh food and all that kind of stuff. And I found that really helpful for navigating.
Then what did you do in Amsterdam?
I picked up some stuff while I was in Amsterdam, and I also I made use of the hotel's breakfast. So we had to do an overnight in Amsterdam before getting the ferry to the UK the next day. And the whole reason I did this ridiculously complex journey was because you cannot fly directly into the UK with a dog in cabin. And I knew that was not a choice to put him in the hold. So that's why I had to go through the EU, the long way around. So when I was in Amsterdam, I even made use of the fact that the hotel breakfast had boiled eggs and Greek yogurt and that kind of a thing. And so I topped up some of his food with that, and he loved it. He was like, this is a treat. And I made sure that I took him on walks that were comfortable for him. So I knew, he'd never experienced that level of cold. He'd never experienced those smells.
And it was cold when you landed. It was cold. We were having another cold snap. So, and that was the first time he experienced grass as well, wasn't it? It was at Amsterdam. So, and it's just all those things you wouldn't necessarily think about, but like grass, and from a microbiome perspective, is a whole new what's happening. Like, it's insane.
All of it.
Yeah.
All of it.
Yeah.
So I didn't put any pressure on him. We had the whole day, or most of the day until before we had to catch the bus for the ferry. And I literally just let him guide me around the area where we were and just sniff and take it in. And surprisingly, he did incredibly well. He was curious about other dogs, which was interesting because I had that
Yeah.
issue back in Mexico where he was really fearful of dogs he didn't know because he'd been attacked on multiple occasions,
Mm.
but he was really curious. And we sat and watched things and I let him sniff. So I did the sniffari thing, like
Yeah.
however long he wanted to sniff something.
And that's so grounding for them anyway,
So
isn't it? That
grounding.
energetically, that would have helped shift some of that energy that was stuck in him from being on the flight and in his casita, as it is his little house, bless him. So I think all of those things would have really helped, and it would have helped ground you as well because you were out and you're
Yeah.
together
Yeah.
and just physically moving and grounding that energy to kind of settle
Yeah.
after that part of the journey.
Yeah.
And then it was the boat.
And then it was the boat. So I had enough supplies for him to get us into the UK. And it was an overnight ferry. And he was not a fan of that. The crossing the North Sea is a rough sea to begin with. And it was like 3 in the morning. I thought we were having a Titanic moment. And I was like, dear God, what have I done to us? But he was not happy with that. He was not sick. I thought he might be, but he did well with that. But he was just not happy. He stayed in his casita.
Mhm.
He did not like having to go to the outdoor toileting area on the boat with the wind, with the waves. But he did it and he did really well. But as soon as we got off the boat, I made sure and we went through customs and did all of that kind of stuff. I just I let him out and he just sniffed and he did a normal poo, which for all of us dog moms, there's a normal poo, you're like,
Eureka moment.
yes. Like it was good. But then I made the decision before going and staying with some friends just to book an Airbnb for a couple of days to give us a chance to decompress, to sleep,
Just the two of you in
just the
that
two of
space.
us,
Yeah.
so he could start to feel comfortable and safe. And we literally did nothing. We just hung out. If he wanted to play, we played. I brought his snuffle mat, which is really familiar to him,
Mhm.
and used that. So he had familiar things, some familiar toys with him. But I think it was really fun because there's a beautiful park. And I think too, because I love the UK and Europe. Like this is my soul home and this is my climate and my landscape. As much as I enjoyed Mexico, I struggled in that climate. And I love the green. And just me being around all of that and being like, oh, I'm home. Like, oh, it just feels so good. I think that helped him feel more comfortable
100%.
for sure.
Yeah.
And there was a big, beautiful park right around the corner from where we were staying at the Airbnb. And I took Lucky with his long lead and we just started walking around. And I was like, oh my God, this is the first time he's seen daffodils. And he was like, and they're taller than him, you know? He was like, what is this thing? Or
What is this huge yellow flower?
yeah, deciduous trees. He's not seen deciduous trees and grass. Like, I mean, we had some grass, but it was more of like a crabgrass kind of thing.
Yeah,
But like
not the moist
not
green
the moist
grass.
grass
Yeah.
and mud. He's never experienced mud before. Like all of these new things. And it was so much fun experiencing it through
His,
his
yeah.
lens, you know, and getting to introduce him to these things. And then we also, where I was staying, it was up in Newcastle upon Tyne on the northeast coast of England. We went to the beach. And so he's very familiar with the beach, but this is
Just a very different
just a
beach.
very different beach. And
Not
getting
as warm.
not as warm. He wasn't thrilled with the water temperature, but giving him some senses of like familiarity
Yeah.
and things to compare to, I think was really helpful. And he did super well. But about a week after, well, no, it wasn't quite a week. It was probably about 5 days after I arrived. He then started with some of the tummy issues.
Mm-hmm. Because at this point you were in the UK and you'd moved him onto a wet food, hadn't you?
I
That
moved
you'd
him
managed to
onto,
get that you'd
yeah,
managed to get hold of.
yeah. So I put him on a commercially prepared cooked food, gently cooked food called Fidelis,
Hmm.
which is beautiful. So what I was sort of evaluating different ingredients, and this is partly because I'm moving around right now as I'm kind of figuring out where I'm going to settle. So I haven't had at this point, I definitely didn't have the facilities to be able to make him food and store food. So it's that thing of like you kind of go for like the best
Yeah.
choice that you have in any particular
Yeah.
situation. And so I was evaluating through the fetch lens, what are some different foods that I can
And
be
which ones would be,
offering?
yeah,
Yeah. So
which ones would suit him by
yeah.
looking at the ingredients and texture and the fact that it was cooked, which is what he's used to. So just trying to eliminate
Yeah.
things through that process, isn't
Yeah.
it?
And oops, sorry. I selected a turkey product at first because I know that he does well with turkey, but even recognizing that he could potentially have issues because the turkey here is going to be different than the turkey that we
Yeah.
sourced over there. And so trying to find something that I thought would be as gentle as possible for him. And although Fidelis has sweet potato in it, which I'm not a massive fan of generally for dogs, and Lucky does okay on it, he can tolerate it.
Okay.
I still felt like it was a really quality ingredient with limited fillers and
Yeah.
synthetics and all of that. And it was a texture that he could
Yeah.
do, and he really enjoyed it. He really enjoyed it, but he did start with some of the tummy issues, and I'm not blaming the food on that. I think it was so much of like just the newness. And he has a history, like I said, of GI issues. When he's stressed, he will present with GI issues. And so it wasn't severe, but it was a little bit of like vomiting, um, and then a little bit of food refusal. And we are going to have a chat about fussy eaters and what that actually
Mm.
means. But for him, for me, that was an indication that his microbiome was a little bit out of whack due to the stress, due to all the newness, and due to the integrating of he will be developing, like me, a new
Microbiome.
microbiome
Yeah.
in response to the new environment, and that you will see blips when that happens. But I also put him on some bone broth to help with that. So it was bone broth and Fidelis. And then I started introducing him to like natural treats, which we didn't have
Yeah.
over there. And he was not a fan.
Yeah, he wasn't, was he?
No, he was not a fan of
Ted's
that.
done really well.
Yeah. I'm getting all, but I mean, it's all interesting to kind of explore with him. But then when we came, or when I was still up there, he started with an itching.
That's where I was just about to go. Then this is when it started to get interesting, wasn't it? Because the itching started. So it wasn't just the GI had kind of eased off a bit by that
But
point, I
it
think.
was kind of around the same time, and part of what I worried about was he was having like severe itching and he had just vomited. And I wondered if he'd either picked something up or there was something else going on. And I had taken him for a walk and I did find a flea on him. So I thought, oh God, he's got fleas. What am I going to do about this? Especially because I don't want to put him on the pharmaceutical
Yeah.
treatments because he's just gone. I don't give them to him anyways for a host of reasons, including supporting his kidney. But I didn't want to have to do it at
Yeah.
this point too, with all of these new changes. And he had one night where it was so bad. He didn't sleep at all. I didn't sleep at all. As a result, he was so itchy, so uncomfortable. And as a fun side note, I did not see the flea at this point. I just suspected that he might, because he was doing that flea nibbling thing. So I thought, yeah,
Yeah.
so I thought it could be that. Um, and I tried to take him to the groomers and left him there, left my phone number, and walked to a store and got a phone call that I had to come and pick him up because he'd escaped from them and would not not allow them to bathe him. So I ended up having to do that
But you did,
myself.
and
I did.
you used a nat was it
It
it was
was
a
a
natural
natural,
soap or shampoo?
it was a natural shampoo that had neem oil in it
Yeah.
just in case there was anything. I didn't see any fleas come out or anything like that. And I haven't been bitten. They've not been in the environment, but I just sort of assumed that's what it was. But then I came down to you and everything escalated.
Yeah, and he was definitely. I mean, so bearing in mind that Lucky's never been in a house with another dog before, and he has coped so beautifully. I don't think either of us could have kind of actually guessed how well he's coped, considering, I mean, bearing in mind Ted has been around lots of other dogs because I used to do daycare and boarding, so he's used to having other dogs in the house and he's not that fussed. But that first day was entertaining. There was a lot of getting to know each other quite personally. There was a lot of licking, let's just say, of private parts. And Ted was very excited. So because he's a hot dog and he's very fiery and he's led by his heart, bless him. So he's very vocal in his approach to the world. So there was a lot of barking, there was a lot of excitement. But I think after that first night, they really just kind of settled into each other's company, and just kind of to see Lucky start to relax was just so magic, just to go, oh, okay, this is you, and you're living in a house with two teenage boys as well, which is another complete like alien experience for him. And my eldest is quite tall, he's like 6'2", and he was quite intimidated at the kind of like, oh my God, he's so huge, like the big ones come down the stairs. But my younger one is very kind of, we always called him the dog whisperer when I had the other dogs stay anyway, because he's been so good with them, and he just sits on the floor and then Lucky's just all over him, and it's just, and you've been kind of amazed as well, haven't you, at just how well he's adapted. And obviously I'd spoken to the boys before Lucky arrived just to say we don't touch his head because he doesn't like it, and given them a little warning about just let him come to you, and they've both respected that. So I think that's, again, from my point of view, it's been about trying to prep for them and Lucky being in the house as well. But it was that first kind of week when you were here, when that itching was just at a height, wasn't it? He just, in the evening, and it all started, it was usually about 10:30 it would start, didn't it? And it was just incessant with lots of along certain points. So of course, this is when the Bible came out, this one, because I kept saying I can't see how it's fleas, because he sleeps in Alexia's bed. So I was like, you would be covered by now if this was a real flea problem. So I was just going, we have to figure this out. So of course we pulled the book out and we started to look at the meridians of where he was chewing, and it was like gallbladder, liver. We were like, so maybe he's having a little, and it's springtime as well, so it's detox season, it's liver season. And so I said, well, I've got some milk thistle. Why don't you? So I think within about 2 days of him starting to have that, we noticed a difference, didn't we? And it started to ease off.
Yeah. And the other thing that we saw alongside the itching, and it was like Stacey was saying, it wasn't, when a dog has fleas, they're itching all over. It was specific spots. And at specific times. He'd go the whole day with no itching. And then it's like Stacey said, around 10:30, it like escalated out of nowhere, and he just couldn't stop.
And he'd get the zoomies as well.
The zoomies.
And Tiger had to come out to play, and it was just, he just kind of woke up out of like a slumber of just, and that witching hour really, really started, didn't it? Yeah.
And one of the key things that we noticed too, which was really interesting, if you listen to my conversation with Yaz Parrott on pain, she talks about the fascia and how you can see when the fascia are tight or there's something going on with it, because it's a connective system throughout the body. The dog's skin will almost wave. There's like a traveling kind of thing. And we would see that if I touched Lucky, even if I didn't touch him, if he kind of had like a little shake, he'd do a shake where you would see his fur. It would travel.
It was amazing I mean, it was obviously he was uncomfortable, so it wasn't amazing in that perspective, but actually to kind of see that in action and what that meant. And I think, was that then when we added the greenlet muscle?
Yeah.
Yeah, but because we knew that, we were thinking, well, how else can we support the fascia, and how else can we support like the structure of the body, for want of a better word. So that's when I had some greenlet muscle for rear flex, and which it hadn't agreed with Ted. So I said, we'll try it. And again, within probably 3-4 days, I think that started to ease as well, didn't it?
Because greenlet muscle is high in omega-3, and that is another form of functional hydration as well for the body, with lipid hydration, and also helping with inflammation. I was still continuing with the bone broth, so I was looking at that. I'd added into the bone broth as well some thyme, which, if you listen to the conversation with Dr. Carol Hughes, that is a fantastic antimicrobial for the gut microbiome, so supporting that. But also, if you listen to our conversation about parasite prevention, that is something that we build in to help ward off fleas as well. So I was doing it as a kind of double whammy to help support him. And as we built in more omega-3, and I think as well as he started to settle, and I added in as well some more mud, which is humic
Hmm.
and fulvic acid, to help with the detox, to bind anything that might be in there and get it out.
Yeah, because
He,
I've been using that for Ted because of the seizures, because there's been some research around the minerals, and humic and fulvic acid is like a perfectly proportioned mineral wheel essentially going in. So I've been using it for Ted. And I was like, oh, no harm in throwing it in, because if we're going to help detox, if we're going to help that liver, it would be a really good thing to add in. And again,
Mhm,
he was a little unsure about it to begin with. He'd never seen anything like that before. So again, it was another new thing to put on his
mhm,
plate, wasn't it? And for
mhm.
him to experience. But we're there, I think, aren't we?
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's done super well, and so that has all pretty much subsided. I mean, last night there was like a
Yeah.
little flare, but not
But you
much.
can still set the time by it. If it's going
Yeah,
to happen, it'll be about 10:30 and the zoomies will start. And you're like, oh, hello, liver
yeah,
time. We're just,
yeah.
we're just waking up, are we? Okay.
So all of that information was really helpful for one, not freaking out about it,
Hmm.
and two, to also look at targeted support. So that's where we're talking about running it through the fetch lens of not only the energetics of the dog, but actually understanding the meridians and where is he constantly irritated that's pointing to a system that needs a little bit more support. And again, it doesn't mean that his liver has a problem. It means that the liver system needs a little support in dealing with what he's just gone through. And like Stacey said, spring is the season that is associated with liver and gallbladder. That's why we have spring cleaning. It's a detox season. So he would have been doing this naturally, but I've now added
The stress of
the
a
stress
giant move
of a
across an
giant move.
Atlantic.
Exactly. And also like different environmental potential allergens that he's never been exposed to before. So his body is coping with a lot. And I think given all of that, I'm absolutely not surprised that he presented with skin irritation, and skin being the biggest detox
Yeah.
organ as well. That would be the way that he presented it. And so just adding in some different levels of support has really, really brought it under control, I think.
Yeah, and by staying curious, which is obviously the next part, that by staying curious and being open to, oh, could it be this? What could it? And then going back to the targeted, by the curiosity fueling that, then that's really, really helped in choosing different supplements and trialing different things. And of course, now he's been exposed to having venison,
Yeah.
which he loves, doesn't he?
He
And as a
loves
cool
venison.
dog, that's really cool to see.
Hmm.
So yeah, so he's had venison, he's had lamb.
He's had lamb,
Yeah.
which was really interesting because I had managed to find some lamb when I was in Mexico once. It's not a common thing where I was. My mom and I found some lamb, and so she had some, and I had gotten some for Lucky, and she was cooking hers in the slow cooker, and Lucky smelled it and was terrified, like tail tucked, pancaking to the ground, trying to get away from it. She ended up putting it outside just so that the smell wasn't as strong for him. And when we walked past her door, he was like, "Oh God." So I didn't, and he wouldn't take any of the meat. He absolutely would have nothing to do with it. So I didn't know if it was that he didn't like lamb
Lamb.
or there was something energetically about that particular lamb. So I was really eager to try him on some. So I did get a little bit of lamb kidney and he wolfed that down. So
Yeah.
that tells me there was something about that lamb that he
Yeah.
wasn't too thrilled about, whether that be, I mean, who knows, what kind of trauma that lamb had held or what have you. But he's done really well with that. But that ties into as well with the foods that I'm trialing out with him. One, taking it slowly because I know that I'm introducing a lot of newness to him, but also because he's a cool dog and we can post photos in our First Light Facebook group that we have where you can see like how tell me you've got a cool dog without telling me you've got a cool dog.
And tell me you got a hot dog without telling me you got a hot dog, because it is like seeing polar extremes. It's hilarious. So Lucky will quite often go out there because it's a sun trap, and we'll just be laying in the sun, and Ted will be in here just going, no, that's not happening. I stay in here where it's cool. Thank you very much. And then Lucky comes in and he's all toasty and warm, and Ted's like, no, that's just too much. I don't want that.
It's so funny, but it's also it points to another level of being able to support him as I'm choosing these new foods to introduce, prioritizing because he's still going to feel the cold even more than I'm feeling it because I'm more used to this and I tend to run warmer, so I like the cooler climate. I'm emphasizing those warming proteins, so venison being one, venison being a great lean protein as
Yeah,
well.
lovely.
He
And because
loves
it's
it.
wild caught, so it's packed full of nutrients. It's such a beautiful meat. And the one what we'd source from our local butchers, it is literally just local. It's just so again, from a microbiome perspective and all that other, it's just magic.
It
Just
is.
love
It's
it.
beautiful. It's beautiful. And I think that's also helped him recover from what's been going on in his liver system because he's getting that appropriate support energetically through the choices of
Hmm.
proteins that I'm offering to him. And I'm also doing some self-selection with him for that. So I've had different proteins on the plate at the same time to allow him to choose what he goes towards. And it's fascinating. Like every time the venison was put out, he was like, "This is mine."
I wanted.
Like a magnet just drawn to it. But again, I'll be curious with that as we go into the summer. Will he adapt in a sense to feeling the heat in a similar way to how I might feel it, right? And that maybe venison might be a little too warming for him, even though he's a cool dog. Because again, with TCM, we always say it's in relation to what? So as it heats up externally, he might not need that same
Mhm.
level of warming up. So I will remain curious, but I know now that he does well with venison and he enjoys it. That's a protein I can add into our rotation.
Yeah. And I think with the kind of holistic approaches as well, because we been taking him out on walks to different places. So he's been exploring a lot of Ted's favourite woods and one of Ted's favourite things to do in the world is play find it. So in that's a big part of our I can't even Hi. Every walk there will be find it because otherwise he doesn't really settle. He needs to get his nose to the ground and in the leaves and in the mud. And so I take tiny little treats or I chop up pate into really little pieces and then I literally just throw it in the air and let it land. And he will do that happily for 15, 20 minutes a day. And it's a really important part of his day. And Lucky's been like, what the hell is this? This is amazing. But he's gone with it, hasn't he?
He
He's
has.
following Ted and he's met so many other dogs, and you've literally just had your jaw on the floor going, he didn't bark at them, he didn't react. And you use a lovely phrase with him, which I absolutely adore, when you just say, he's a friend.
Mhm.
And I think that's such a lovely kind of pretext. Is that the right word?
Yeah.
Pretext? Yeah, pretext to the meeting. So there's no tension in the lead and there's no pulling him back. He's on a long line. And he will come back to you for some reassurance, but then you just say to him, "Oh, it's just a friend," and it's in a really lovely, relaxed voice, so there's no tension in it. And he's just coped so beautifully. There was a couple of pointers that he was a bit unsure about, but they're busy. But the Goldens he's met, some of the big dogs he's met, he's just kind of been like, "Oh, hi," and he's just been watching her face. She's who is this dog? But I think some of that has have been having Ted because
Yep.
Ted's very comfortable with where he walks, and obviously he sees a lot of those dogs regularly, so he doesn't have. And because Ted isn't doesn't play with other dogs in the he doesn't engage in chasing and that kind of stuff. He's just a plodder, bless him. That I think that's really helped, hasn't it? Because
Mhm.
it's almost like he's had a big brother to look
Yeah.
up to, and it's just like, well, if you think they're safe, then that's okay. And
Yeah.
he's kind of taken some reassurance from Ted. So it's been really beautiful, kind of watching that evolve and knowing that, he is now expanding his microbiome because he's getting his nose into the dirt and he's walking through mud and he was a bit hesitant by the stream, wasn't he? Because
Hmm.
that was deeper in the
Hmm.
water, and it was fresh water, so it was fresh flowing water. He's
He's
never
never
seen that
experienced that.
before. So for this little dog to experience literally a whole new world, it's just been, and to consider that in reality he's had those blips were relatively minor, but because you were able to put it through fetch and think the way that we do, I think it probably speeded up that process rapidly
Hmm.
because you didn't have to keep second guessing yourself. You just felt confident in well, we'll just try this. And if that doesn't work, we'll just try the next thing and just
Yeah.
keep going until you got there.
Yeah. And I do think as well, I wanted to add that when he wasn't well, when he'd had the vomiting and he'd had that extreme night of itching, he didn't look well. And I actually messaged Stace and said, "Do you think that this is something I just need to kind of like externalize this? Do I need to go to the emergency vet?" Because of course it was a Saturday. Thank you.
Why wouldn't it be?
And she said, you might want to ask the vet. And I managed to get a hold of a vet that does
Mm.
have some office hours on a Saturday, and I was able to speak with them and say, this is what I'm seeing going on. This is what we've just been through. Do you think this warrants coming into the vet? And I was doing that from the perspective of Lucky really struggles with going to the vet. So it's not that I won't take him to the vet. I absolutely will take him
Mm.
to the vet. Like that is the first port of call when you think that there's a major problem with your dog. But if the vet didn't feel like it was an emergency thing, I didn't want to add stress to an already stressful situation by bringing him in. And the vet said, no, in her opinion, it was not an emergency, just to watch him. And if it got worse, to bring him in.
Mm.
And he improved. And he improved after giving him the bath too. He hates having a bath, like, and he will do the Chihuahua terror, like, I'm gonna kill you for trying to do this to me. But he was better after that. I think that gave him some relief. And also on the bath note, the next thing, I didn't want to give him too many baths and dry him out. But the next bath that I'm going to be giving him, I'm going to be using the Ingenious
Mm.
Probiotics probiotic shampoo to help support his skin microbiome as well as another way of approaching this. So I'm doing it internally with the food. I'm doing it internally with different
Supplements. Yeah.
supplements, adding things in, like I was saying to the bone broth. We've been doing that because we've been doing a joint bone broth for the boys, adding in thyme and oregano and garlic and
Yeah.
that kind
And
of stuff.
shiitake mushrooms and just building a broth that's just packed full of, extra nutrients so that they're both getting the benefits of it.
So it's again, it's that multi-layered approach
Mm.
to everything. Um, but had it necessitated it, I absolutely would have gone
Yeah.
to the vet. So I just want
Yeah.
to put that out there that I'm not saying to avoid those sorts of things
Yeah.
and just rely on all this. It's putting it all together. And I had the reassurance from the vet that no, it didn't need to be a
Yeah.
concern. And he picked up after I gave him just a couple of hours or fed him in the afternoon, which is what she suggested. And he did okay with that. So
Yeah, I think, but I think it's really opened our eyes, hasn't it, in terms
mhm.
of that being able to just utilize that fetch, even for us. It was just like, well, what do we do next? And then why are we curious? Okay, so that's when we dived into the book, and
Yeah.
then that's when we started asking more questions. And then when you started fitting the pieces together of the puzzle, it was like, oh wow, it does work. This is so cool. And then it was just more reassurance, I think, wasn't it, that it is really, really helpful.
Yeah. And I think too, like adding into this sort of curiosity component of it as well. Like I said, this was a huge thing for me, and I had to, and as if you've listened to any of the March minisodes where I was reflecting on, I recorded those prior to the trip, and I was reflecting on my process of making this decision and having to decide whether or not I felt this was an appropriate thing to do with Lucky. And I took that very seriously, like weighing up, knowing how he was in terms of his reactivity,
Mhm.
his resistance to change and all that kind of stuff. I was really frightened about having made the wrong decision for him. But one of the things that I really wanted for him and for me was to widen our world. That was at the core of because again, I didn't intend on going to Mexico
And
and
getting a dog.
Spain and getting a dog, right? Like that was never part of the plan.
Well, it was
It
part of someone's plan. It
was
just wasn't part
someone's
of your
plan. It was a part of my
plan.
conscious plan. But I knew that I wanted to get back here and all the exciting things that we have going on together. And we'll tell you about some upcoming stuff that you can come and participate in. But I think the most beautiful thing for me has been seeing him thrive in a way that I didn't even know that he could, and
Yeah,
realizing he's so much more resilient than I thought he
yeah,
was, which is also reflective of my own resilience, right? So it's that mirroring of like showing me I can do this too. But it's given me so much more confidence in putting him in new
yeah,
situations with caution, right? Like, so I'm not just throwing him into stuff that I don't think he can handle. It's just being aware, though, of the limitations I would have had, and I certainly did carry around what I thought he could do, and seeing
I need to do a toilet break. Not
a,
me, but for Ted. One moment. I'll be back. Sorry. We going
but just sort of seeing where I had told myself that something wasn't possible, and in reality, he's showing me just how unbelievably incredible and resilient he is, and that he's totally game for being exposed to new things and trying new things. And I think that's something that's been just incredibly heartwarming and encouraging and all of that good stuff. I think Ted doesn't need the toilet. He needs his early 2 o'clock treat.
That's tiny. That's not going to work, is it? Really?
Life with dogs.
Like with Ted, I think is another. Just, I mean, you could set a clock, but he's so, yeah, we love him.
We do love him. We do love him. And he's been so good with Lucky. And yeah, like Stacey said, I think he's been a reassuring rock for Lucky in a number of different situations. And he's also taught Lucky his little tricks about how to get food.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, I was just reflecting when you said about widening his world when I was dealing with Treatgate. Um, but I think because it was so lovely the other day because lucky you were even feeling like confident just to let him off the lead a little bit, and he just followed Ted. He just stuck with him, and it was just so lovely to see that. And then we got back in the car, and you're like, wow, his world has literally just opened up into a whole new space, and that realization that it could be so much more than he had before, and now he's got this literally the whole world at his footsteps. Footsteps, yeah,
His paw steps.
Paw step, that's better. But yeah, I think for me, it's just been beautiful to watch to see like this little dog that I'd obviously spoken to a lot over Zoom, and then to have him here and him just kind of flourish and just kind of be in this really confident and being around my big burly teenagers and around me and around Ted and just kind of going, all right, what's next?
And seeking out affection from them. I mean, that's
Coming into my bed and getting into my bed and snuggling down by my feet. Like, and he came up for a cuddle the other day, and Alexa just looked at me like, "What the hell's happened?" I was allowed to scratch his belly and stuff, and he was like, "Yeah, come on in." I was like, "Oh, okay, I am privileged." So apparently, I'm in the cartel now.
You are.
I'm approved. But I think that just speaks to the fact, like you were saying, about his resilience and the fact that in the right circumstances, with the right prep, with the right support, kind of food wise, energetically, all those other things, it does fit together and they can manage these huge changes really well. There will be blips, but that's just life anyway. There's blips for us, there's blips for them. But I think knowing that you had the resources and the tools to kind of fall back on, you were able to make those choices comfortably and confidently about what to do next. And that getting reassurance from a vet and then us speaking and then us doing a deep dive and then us tweaking and doing those and us both talking through it. That's why, like with the Facebook group and stuff, that's what we're trying to create, where you can start to learn this way of thinking rather than just taking in information but not knowing what to do with it. Because I think that's where we all get stuck. It's like, well, I've read an article, but what does that actually mean and how do I apply that to my dog? So that's kind of where we're going with the Facebook group, isn't it?
100%, 100%. And also with the Facebook group, we'll be reflecting on another component of the H that I think has been really helpful in this whole journey too, is prioritizing my own energy work so that I can create that safe space for Lucky. Because I talk about this a lot in terms of like how Reiki actually works, that Reiki first and foremost is a self-healing practice. So it's you getting yourself into that calm state so that the other person or the dog can come into resonance with that. It's not the sending of energy, it's you creating that state for yourself and creating that resonance. So having that background, I was really conscious of the way to help support him is to actually support myself. And so I had to prioritize my own practices, whether that was I just need to get out in nature for a few minutes, or I need to go put my feet on the ground, or I need to just sit in the bathroom by myself without him for like 5 minutes, to like deep breathe or whatever it is. It's finding those practices that help you find your peace so that you can create that environment that feels peaceful for your dog, and they will reflect that back. So that's also part of what we talk about in Fetch. And back to the Facebook group, that's part of what we're going to be doing in there as well, where it's not just, can I feed my dog raw lamb? Question. We answer those questions, and we have answered those questions. But it's about so much more in teaching you how to use this framework in exactly the same kind of way. So you can navigate these questions confidently yourself, but we're there to kind of guide you.
Yeah, and support you as you kind of work your way through each of the steps rather than just doing one bit alone and actually because it's about looking at it as a whole, and each of those elements will have a part. So it's how do you break it down and how do you apply that to your individual dog, knowing what you know about them from an energetic perspective and what supplements might work or might not work, and how do you choose a supplement and how do you choose a food, which we've been discussing that a lot, haven't we, about, how do you, because there's you get all the posts and you get all the information about, what's the best food and this, that, and the other. But it's great that you get an ingredient list, but if you don't actually understand how that applies to your dog, it's still not going to help. It's how do you integrate what we're trying to demonstrate with the F.E.T.C.H framework to actually utilize for your individual dog, because no two are going to be the same.
Exactly.
And that's why it gives you the flexibility to be able to look at things through the F.E.T.C.H lens and then just make decisions based on what feels right for you as well. Because I think so much of it is about, if we're coming at it from a place of fear rather than coming at it from a place of love as well, when we're making those decisions, if we're fearful and we're scared and we're unsure. But if you feel more confident and aligned with it and it resonates with you because you read something, you go, actually, that's it. I've been waiting for that bit. That's the piece of the puzzle. And then it starts to click, and then other things will start to fall into place. So it's just watching those puzzle pieces come together. Love it. So exciting.
And so if you're wondering why are we talking about a Facebook group, we've got some big things that we're planning here at F.E.T.C.H HQ. And it has started with, we've mentioned to you before that Stacey and I are both, from a human design perspective, manifesting generators. And that means we pivot. We're really comfortable with, like, when something's not working. Yeah. And when something's not quite working, we are quick to make the change. And we had set up a Patreon group as our starting point for building a membership, a safe space for people to for you to come and join us on this journey and learn how to use the F.E.T.C.H framework. And while Patreon was really great in some respects, it was not the right platform to facilitate the kind of transformation that we know F.E.T.C.H can create for you. So we've taken ourselves off of Patreon, and we are building a membership specific platform, which we are so excited about. This is going to have features that are going to be so helpful for you to make sense of all of this craziness, to cut through the noise, get clear, make decisions with confidence, be able to access the information that you specifically need on a personalized journey in a membership.
That is so cool.
Yeah, it's so cool. It's so awesome. But so we are building that out as we speak. In the interim, we have come over to Facebook to create our
F.E.T.C.H First Light Facebook group, because why not? Because that's what we do. And it's the first light, it's the introduction, it's putting the first light on the F.E.T.C.H lens to introduce you to the ideas and to introduce you to the concepts and how to work through the acronym and each of the letters. And it's going to be a really lovely space, and we've already got some really lovely members in there asking some great questions. We've done our first Q&A live. We've got another one next week, haven't we, for April? So we just want to be able to create a space where people can come in and ask questions, but ask questions in a very special way, because we want the group to be somewhere very different. We appreciate that there are so many wonderful Facebook groups out there, and they're brilliant resources. But from a point of view, we want you to understand and learn how to use the F.E.T.C.H framework. So we're going to be asking you to ask questions in a F.E.T.C.H framework way. So I'm going to be working on a post later today, and we'll get it put up about how we're going to do that, because we think the only way for you to kind of start learning it and integrating it is to start asking the question in the F.E.T.C.H way.
And learn how to answer for one another through the F.E.T.C.H lens. So you're thinking about it in the same way that we just were thinking through Lucky's whole journey. And that will make you feel so much more confident about making decisions, because I think the kind of top things that we hear from you guys are, I feel overwhelmed by all the stuff that's out there, and I don't feel confident. I don't want to get it wrong. I don't want to mess up. So those are the two top things that F.E.T.C.H helps you address, so that you can cut through, like I said, all of that noise, all of the different stuff that's on social media, all of the quote unquote superfoods, all of that stuff. Should I feed my dog this? Can I do this? All of that can feel paralyzing, to be honest. will help you figure out what are the appropriate things for you to do with your dog so that you can then take that learning forward and navigate that, as well as have the right questions to be asking the vet or other health professionals so that you're getting the answers that are helpful for you, making the decision that is most resonant for you in your situation and your particular dog. So if you are interested, like Stacey said, we have our next free monthly live call. So the Facebook group is completely free. Just come and join us, hang out there. It's a lovely group of people. I think if you're looking for a community of like-minded people who are thinking and feeling like this about their dogs, you're going to really love being in there. Absolutely. But we have our live Q&A on Monday. So if you're interested, come and join the group so you get access to that. It is Facebook. I'll leave the link in the show notes, but it's under Facebook groups. It's F.E.T.C.H First Light. You can come and join us there, and then hopefully we'll see some of you on Monday. And we do host it. We have the replay as well, so if you can't make it live, you can have access to the replay. Yeah. And if you want to come and see us in person, we have another exciting announcement.
Yeah, well, we're going to be at Sussex Green Living is a charity that's based in Horsham, where I am in West Sussex, and they have started a new festival called Plant to Play. That's it? And you had been in communication with them about something else, hadn't you? And then you kind of told them who you were, and then they were like, "Oh, that's really interesting." And they were like, "Would you come and do a talk?" And we were like, "Well, yeah, we'll do a talk." And that it was about it's parasite prevention and kind of the more holistic approaches because of the environmental impact of pharmaceuticals, because of the latest songbird study that came out about the songbirds that are dying, unfortunately, because they're getting hold of dog fur that's got the fipronil and some of those other not so nice ingredients in them, and the waterway study that came out last year. So it's just tying all that in about the environment and other approaches that we could be taking. So that's going to be so exciting. I can't wait for that one. That's on the 26th. I got it right.
The 26th of April. So we'll leave some information. If you're in the local area of Horsham, West Sussex in the UK, come and see us in person.
And there's some other great speakers as well doing some other incredible topics. There's a lady doing some great garden stuff, isn't there? And but from it was microbiome, kind of all sorts of things, wasn't it?
Looking at supporting the soil. There's charities that are talking about various aspects of kind of wildlife support, of nutrition, and how we can rethink farming practices and all of that kind of stuff. So taking a more ecosystem perspective, and that's something that we're really interested in, and that F.E.T.C.H speaks to as well, of how do we and our dogs and supporting dogs sit within this wider physical environmental ecosystem, but also spiritual ecosystem, and just all of those questions. So one of the things that we'll be addressing with our talk is how do we bridge that gap in the conversation between, obviously, those of us as pet parents want to make sure that our dogs are safe, but we also want to make sure that we are taking care of the environment and the responsibility of that. And so how do we better navigate that conversation, and how do we better navigate choices for our dogs around parasite prevention? So if you haven't listened to our episode where we speak about that, I'll leave a link in the show notes to that one as well. That is a really helpful conversation for starting to think through these questions, because it's not about definitely do this, definitely don't do this. It's finding what's right for your particular situation. And we do have a PDF for sale as well to help you evaluate your own particular risk and then create a parasite prevention plan that is tailored to you and your dog.
And on your level of risk, and that in there's questions so you can actually figure out what your level of risk is, like depending on how much outside time your dog gets, where your garden's based, just all those types of things, other animals in the house, those types of things. So you can actually start to understand where your dog's risk level is in comparison to the need potentially for pharma, or whether you could use a holistic or you do a kind of hybrid. There's so many ways of doing it. And I think that's, again, what F.E.T.C.H does. It just makes you think about things differently. There's no black and white. It's just there's many, and we can be flexible. And Flexicamp.
And
Flexicamp.
Exactly. So if you are in the area on the 26th of April, we would love to see you there. Okay. Otherwise, I think that's probably it for this weekend.
And Lucky looks like he's falling asleep on your lap now. He's just you can just see the ears.
He's starting to droop.
Yeah.
But we will look forward to seeing you either in the Fetch First Light Facebook group, or we will see you next month where we will be talking about lab-grown meats and vegan dog food and our take on that through the Fetch lens. Yeah. All right. Till next time. Bye. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Fetch First Friday. Stacey and I hope that you enjoyed it. Have you made a big move with your dog, or have you experienced a big life change that you navigated with your dog? What did you find useful in your experience? We would love to know. Leave a comment or get in touch on Instagram at Mystic Dog Mama and let us know. Like we said, we're working away here at Fetch HQ to build an incredible membership platform to support you in cutting through the noise to gain clarity and confidence in taking the next best step on your dog's health journey. As we do this, come join us in our free Facebook group, Fetch First Light, and be surrounded by a community of like-minded folks who want to integrate evidence-based nutrition with spiritual wisdom in order to create optimal health for their dogs and for themselves. I've left this link along with the other episodes that we mentioned in the show notes. All right, until next time.